What safety device is usually located between the driving unit and hydraulic pump drive shaft? Pump drive coupling shear section. Almost all engine-driven hydraulic pumps have a shear section in their drive coupling. If all of the pressure relief devices should fail, or if the pump should seize, the shaft will shear and prevent the pump from being further damaged. What type of valve in an aircraft hydraulic system permits fluid to flow freely in one direction, but restricts the rate at which fluid is allowed to flow in the other direction? Orifice check valve. An orifice check valve permits fluid to flow freely in one direction, but restricts the rate of flow in the opposite direction. Which seal material is used with phosphate ester base hydraulic fluids? Butyl rubber. Butyl rubber seals are used with phosphate ester base hydraulic fluid. The primary purpose of a hydraulic actuating unit is to transform fluid pressure into useful work. The primary purpose of any hydraulic actuating unit is to transform fluid pressure into useful work. Which seals are used with petroleum-based hydraulic fluids? Butane. Seals used in hydraulic systems using petroleum-based fluids are made of neoprene or butane. Butyl rubber seals are used with phosphate ester-based fluids. How is the air in a hydraulic accumulator prevented from entering the fluid system? By physically separating the air chamber from the oil chamber with a flexible or movable separator. Air in the accumulator is kept out of the fluid portion of the hydraulic system by the two chambers of the accumulator being separated by a diaphragm, a bladder, or a movable piston. What function does the absolute pressure regulator perform in the pneumatic power system? Regulates the compressor inlet air to provide a stabilized source of air for the compressor. The absolute pressure regulator in an aircraft pneumatic system regulates the air pressure at the inlet to the compressor. In doing this, it provides a stabilized source of air for the compressor. A loud hammering noise in a hydraulic system that has an accumulator usually indicates to low or no preload in the accumulator. A loud hammering noise in a hydraulic system using an accumulator is often caused by a loss of accumulator air preload. The pressure regulator puts the pump on the line. Since there is no compressible fluid in the system, the cutout pressure is immediately reached. This causes a shock on the system. The purpose of restrictors in hydraulic systems is to control the rate of movement of hydraulically operated mechanisms. Restrictors, a hydraulic system, controlled the rate of movement of hydraulically operated mechanisms. They control the rate of movement by restricting the flow of fluid into the mechanism. One of the distinguishing characteristics of an open center selector valve used in a hydraulic system is that fluid flows through the valve in the off position. In an open center hydraulic selector valve, fluid flows through the valve when it is in the off position. Open center selector valves are installed in series with each other, while closed center valves are installed in parallel with each other. Which of the following safeguards ensures proper system operation and mitigates damage to non-metallic components of the hydraulic system? When adding fluid to a system, use the type specified in the aircraft manufacturer's maintenance manual or on the instruction plate affixed to the reservoir or unit being serviced. To assure proper system operation and to avoid damage to non-metallic components of the hydraulic system, the correct fluid must be used. When adding fluid to a system, use the type specified in the aircraft manufacturer's maintenance manual or on the instruction plate affixed to the reservoir or unit. If two actuating cylinders which have the same cross-sectional area but different lengths of stroke are connected to the same source of hydraulic pressure, they will exert equal amounts of force and will move at the same rate of speed. If two actuating cylinders with pistons having the same cross-sectional area but different lengths of stroke are connected to the same source of hydraulic pressure, it will exert equal amounts of force and they will move at the same rate of speed, but it will take them different lengths of time to reach the end of their stroke. The air that is expended and no longer needed when an actuating unit is operated in a pneumatic system is exhausted or dumped, usually overboard. After a pneumatic component has been actuated, the compressed air is dumped overboard. If fluid is added to a reservoir in a constant pressure hydraulic system while the system is pressurized, what will result? The fluid level will increase when system pressure is reduced. Fluid is drawn from the reservoir when pressure is built up in the system and the accumulator is charged. If fluid is added to the reservoir while the system is pressurized, the fluid level will increase when the system pressure is reduced. Teflon hose that has developed a permanent set from being exposed to high pressure or temperature should not be straightened or bent further. When a Teflon hose that has developed a permanent set from exposure to high pressure or temperature is removed from an aircraft hydraulic system, its ends should be supported to prevent the hose from being straightened or further bent. Before removing the filler cap of a pressurized hydraulic reservoir, in order to service the system, you must relieve the air pressure. Some hydraulic reservoirs are pressurized with bleed air from the engine, compressor, or from a venturi. All of the air pressure must be relieved before a pressurized reservoir is opened. The hydraulic component that automatically directs fluid from either the normal source or an emergency source to an actuating cylinder is called a shuttle valve. A shuttle valve is an automatic valve mounted on a landing gear actuating cylinder or brake cylinder. It directs normal system fluid into the component for normal operation, but in an emergency, it automatically shifts to allow fluid from the emergency system to enter the component. Chattering of the hydraulic pump during operation is an indication that air is entering the pump. An air leak at the inlet side of a hydraulic pump will cause it to chatter as it alternately gets air and then hydraulic fluid. Some hydraulic systems incorporate a device which is designed to remain open to allow normal fluid flow in the line, but closed if the fluid flow increases above an established rate. This device is generally referred to as a hydraulic fuse. A hydraulic fuse may shut off the flow of fluid when either an excessive rate of flow occurs or when an excessive amount of flow has occurred. Under normal operation, a fuse acts as an open line. Characteristics of MIL H7640 Fu hydraulic fluid are blue color, vegetable base, will burn natural rubber seals. MIL H7640 for hydraulic fluid is a blue vegetable base fluid. It will burn and should be used with components that have natural rubber seals. A hydraulic motor converts fluid pressure to rotary motion. A hydraulic motor converts fluid pressure into rotary motion. How would the air pressure charge in the accumulator be determined if the engine is inoperative, but the system still has hydraulic pressure? Operate a hydraulic unit slowly and note the pressure at which a rapid pressure drop begins as it goes towards zero. The air pressure charge in an accumulator may be determined by slowly operating some hydraulic unit, such as the power brakes, to bleed the pressure off of the system. Watch the system pressure gauge. The last pressure indicated on the gauge before it suddenly drops to zero is the pressure of the air in the accumulator. The removal of air from an aircraft hydraulic system is generally accomplished by operating the various hydraulic components through several cycles. Air is removed from most hydraulic systems by cycling the components through several operating cycles. This operation will remove the fluid that contains air from double-acting hydraulic components. Single-acting components, such as brakes, must be bled separately, by bleeding some of the fluid from the system to remove the air. A unit which transforms hydraulic pressure into linear motion is called an actuating cylinder. An actuating cylinder is a device that transforms hydraulic fluid pressure into linear motion. If it is necessary to adjust several pressure-regulating valves in a hydraulic system, what particular sequence, if any, should be followed? Units with the highest pressure settings are adjusted first. When adjusting several pressure-regulating valves, a hydraulic system, always adjust the valve with the highest pressure setting first. If a valve having a lower pressure setting is adjusted first, you will never be able to reach the pressure required for the higher setting. What happens to the output of a constant displacement hydraulic pump when the hydraulic system pressure regulator diverts the fluid from the system to the reservoir? The output pressure reduces, but the volume remains the same. When the system pressure regulator opens to unload the pump, the fluid passes from the reservoir through the pump to the pressure regulator, back into the reservoir, with almost no opposition. The volume remains the same, but the pump output pressure drops to almost zero. The system pressure regulator traps the pressure in the system where it is held by the accumulator. How many of these seals are used with petroleum-based hydraulic fluids? Neoprene, butane. Seals used with petroleum-based hydraulic fluid are made of synthetic rubber. Neoprene and butane are forms of synthetic rubber. After a hydraulic accumulator has been installed, an air chamber charge, the main system hydraulic pressure gauge will not show a hydraulic pressure reading until the fluid side of the accumulator has been charged. Even though a hydraulic accumulator has been charged with air, no system pressure will show on the main system gauge until fluid has been pumped into the fluid side of the accumulator. Seals used with a mineral-based hydraulic fluid are identified by which color, coat, blue dot or stripe. The material of which the seal is made, its age, and its hardness are all important when making the proper replacement. Mineral-based hydraulic fluid MIL H5606 should use a seal with a blue dot or stripe. Which characteristics apply to aircraft hydraulic systems? Minimum maintenance requirements, lightweight, and simple to inspect. Hydraulic systems have many advantages as a power source for operating various aircraft units. Hydraulic systems combine the advantages of lightweight, ease of installation, simplicity of inspection, and minimum maintenance requirements. Hydraulic operations are also almost 100% efficient, with only a negligible loss due to fluid friction, which must be done before adjusting the relief valve of a main hydraulic system incorporating a pressure regulator. Eliminate the action of the unloading valve. Before any pressure relief valves, a hydraulic system can be adjusted. The pressure regulator, which is also known as the unloading valve, must be temporarily set to a pressure above that of the relief valve being set, or its action must be eliminated in some other way. If the operation of the unloading valve is not eliminated, the pressure will never rise high enough to adjust the relief valve. If an engine-driven hydraulic pump of the correct capacity fails to maintain normal system pressure during the operation of a cowl flap actuating unit, the probable cause is restriction in the pump outlet. If there is a restriction in the pump outlet or between the pump outlet and the system pressure regulator, the system pressure will drop when some unit is actuated. Using a hand pump, pressure of 100 psi has been built up in a hydraulic system. The hand pump piston is 1 inch in diameter. A 1/2 inch line connects the hand pump to an actuating cylinder 2 inches in diameter. What is the pressure in the line between the hand pump and the actuator? 100 psi. According to Pascal's law, pressure is the same in all parts of an enclosed system. If the hand pump builds up a pressure of 100 psi, this same pressure will exist in the 1/2 inch diameter line as well as in the 2-inch diameter actuating cylinder. Which characteristics apply to aircraft hydraulic systems? Minimum maintenance requirements, lightweight, and simple to inspect. Hydraulic systems have many advantages as a power source for operating various aircraft units. Hydraulic systems combine the advantages of lightweight, ease of installation, simplicity of inspection, and minimum maintenance requirements. Hydraulic operations are also almost 100% efficient, with only a negligible loss due to fluid friction. The primary purpose of a hydraulic actuating unit is to transform fluid pressure into useful work. The primary purpose of any hydraulic actuating unit is to transform fluid pressure into useful work. A worn hydraulic pump shaft seal can normally be detected by hydraulic fluid flowing from the pump drain line. Hydraulic pumps have a shaft seal vented into a compartment in the pump and drain overboard. If the pump shaft seal leaks, hydraulic fluid will drip out of the overboard drain line. A hydraulic system operational check during ground run-up of an aircraft indicates that the wing flaps cannot be lowered using the main hydraulic system, but can be lowered by using the emergency hand pump. Which is the most likely cause? The fluid level in the reservoir is low. If the level of the fluid in the reservoir is below the outlet that feeds the engine-driven pump, portions of the system can be actuated by the emergency hand pump, but not by the engine-driven pump. Which valve installed in a hydraulic system will have the highest pressure setting? Thermal relief valve. A thermal relief valve would be adjusted to a higher pop-off pressure than any of the other valves in a hydraulic system. Thermal relief valves are installed in portions of a hydraulic system that normally hold fluid trapped by a selector valve. They relieve the pressure that is built up in the lines as the fluid is heated by the surrounding air. Thermal relief valves are set to relieve a pressure higher than any of the other valves, so they will not interfere with normal system operation or protection. The primary function of the flap overload valve is to prevent the flaps from being lowered at airspeeds which would impose excessive structural loads. A flap overload valve prevents the flaps from being lowered at an airspeed that would impose excessive structural loads on the aircraft. Which is true regarding the ground check of a flap operating mechanism which has just been installed. If the time required to operate the mechanism decreases with successive operations, it indicates the air is being worked out of the system. It is a normal procedure for a double-acting system, such as the flap operating mechanism, to have air in it when it is first installed. To remove this air, the system is cycled through its operation a number of times. As the air is expelled from the system, the operating time will decrease because of the loss of the compressible fluid in the system. To check the air charge in a hydraulic accumulator, reduce all hydraulic pressure, then observe the reading on the accumulator air gauge. The modern practice is to measure the hydraulic system pressure on the nitrogen or air side of the accumulator. When no engine is running and all hydraulic pressure is removed from the system, the accumulator gauge reads the amount of the accumulator air preload. Phosphate ester base hydraulic fluid is very susceptible to contamination from water in the atmosphere. Phosphate ester hydraulic fluid is susceptible to contamination from moisture in the atmosphere. For this reason, the fluid containers must always be tightly capped when not in use. A common cause of slow actuation of hydraulic components is internal leakage in the actuating unit. Internal leakage in an actuating unit is a common cause of slow actuation of a hydraulic component. If a hydraulic brake system uses neoprene rubber packing materials, the correct hydraulic fluid to service the system is mineral base oil. A hydraulic system that uses mineral base fluid should use neoprene rubber. Packing materials systems using vegetable base fluid should use natural rubber seals, and systems using phosphate ester base fluid should use butyl seals. What is the main purpose of a pressurized reservoir, a hydraulic system? Prevent hydraulic pump cavitation. Reservoirs for hydraulic systems used in aircraft that fly at extremely high altitudes are normally pressurized to produce a positive supply of fluid to the engine-driven pump. This prevents the pump cavitation. Materials which are Skydrol compatible or resistant include epoxy paints and most common aircraft metals. Skydrol does not appreciably affect common aircraft metals such as aluminum, silver, zinc, magnesium, cadmium, iron, stainless steel, bronze, chromium, and others, as long as the fluids are kept free from contaminants. Paints, such as epoxies and polyurethanes, are also Skydrol resistant. If the hydraulic system pressure is normal while the engine-driven pump is running, but there is no pressure after the engine has been shut off, it indicates no air pressure in the accumulator. Air is required in an accumulator to hold pressure in the system after the engine is shut down. If the system does not hold pressure, there is no air pressure in the accumulator. A crossflow valve, which is designed to bypass fluid from one side of an actuating cylinder to the other side, under certain conditions, may be found in some aircraft installed in the landing gear system. The function of a crossflow valve is to bypass hydraulic fluid from the landing gear upline to the downline when the landing gear is being extended. When the landing gear is released from its uplocks, its weight causes it to fall so rapidly that fluid cannot fill behind the piston in the actuating cylinder, and excessive pressure builds up on the opposite side of the piston. The crossflow valve permits fluid to flow from the upside of the piston to the downside, and thus allows the gear to fall more easily and with an even motion. If an aircraft's constant pressure hydraulic system cycles more frequently than usual and no fluid leakage can be detected, the most probable cause is low accumulator air preload. A hydraulic system cycling more frequently, and it should, is an indication that the accumulator air preload is low. The accumulator is not holding the pressure on the system as long as it will if the preload pressure is correct. In a gear-type hydraulic pump, a mechanical safety device incorporated to protect the pump from overload is the shear pin. A shear pin, or a shear section of the drive shaft, is used with a constant displacement, engine-driven, gear-type hydraulic pump to protect the pump from damage in case of an overload. If all the regulating and relief valves fail, the shaft will shear and keep the pump from being more seriously damaged. Where can information be obtained about the compatibility of fire-resistant hydraulic fluid with aircraft materials? Fluid manufacturers' technical bulletins. Manufacturers' technical bulletins provide information on the compatibility of fire-resistant hydraulic fluids with aircraft materials. What is commonly used to connect an emergency source of power, and at the same time disconnect a normal hydraulic source from critical parts of a landing gear or wheel braking system for operation, usually when the normal source system fails? Shuttle valve. A shuttle valve is used in some systems to ensure that if an emergency source of hydraulic power is needed, only the essential parts of the system are actuated. The main system pressure relief valve in a simple hydraulic system equipped with a power control valve should be adjusted with the power control valve held in the closed position. A hydraulic power control valve is a hand-operated shut-off valve with an automatic turn-on feature. It must be closed manually, but it opens automatically. When the unit is open, it permits free circulation of fluid from the engine-driven pump to the reservoir. In this way, it relieves the pump of its load. In order to adjust the system pressure relief valve, the power control valve must be pushed into its closed position and held until the system pressure builds up high enough to adjust the system pressure relief valve. What type of selector valve is one of the most commonly used in hydraulic systems to provide for simultaneous flow of fluid into and out of a connected actuating unit? For port, closed center valve. The most commonly used selector valve in an aircraft hydraulic system is a four-port, closed center selector valve. An aircraft pneumatic system, which incorporates an engine-driven multi-stage reciprocating compressor, also requires a Moster separator. A Moster separator must be used in an aircraft pneumatic system that incorporates engine-driven compressors. The Moster separator separates the moisture from the compressed air before the air is allowed to expand in the system. If moisture were allowed to remain in the air, the temperature drop that occurs when the air expands would cause it to freeze and block the system, which is a characteristic of petroleum-based hydraulic fluid. Flammable under normal conditions. Petroleum-based hydraulic fluid is flammable under normal conditions. Because of the flammability of mineral-based fluid, synthetic fluids have been developed. Hydraulic fluid reservoirs are sometimes designed with a standpipe in one of the outlet ports in order to assure emergency supply of fluid. The outlet port with the standpipe in it furnishes fluid to the normal system power pump. The normal system power pump connects to the fluid outlet of the reservoir that is fed from the standpipe. If the power pump forces all of the fluid available to it overboard through a broken line, there will still be fluid in the reservoir that can be used by the emergency hand pump. Select the valve used in a hydraulic system that directs pressurized fluid to one end of an actuating cylinder and simultaneously directs return fluid to the reservoir from the other end. Selector. A selector valve is a fluid power system component that directs the flow of pressurized fluid to one end of an actuating cylinder and simultaneously directs return fluid to the reservoir from the other end of the cylinder. The purpose of the pressure regulator in a hydraulic system is to maintain system operating pressure within a predetermined range and to unload the pump. A hydraulic system pressure regulator maintains a system operating pressure within a predetermined range. The regulator unloads the pump when the upper limit of this pressure is reached. The pump remains unloaded, circulating the fluid through the system with no opposition until the lower limit of the pressure is reached, at which time the pump again forces fluid into the system. An emergency supply of fluid is often retained in the main hydraulic system reservoir by the use of a standpipe. The supply line is connected to the inlet of the main hydraulic system. The supply line from the standpipe in a hydraulic reservoir is attached to the inlet of the main hydraulic system pump. This standpipe ensures that there will be a supply of fluid available to the emergency pump if the main system pump should force overboard all of the fluid available to it.